Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Tuesday night slash evening, joining you live from Kampala, Uganda, where it's 16 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. We are here yet again to discuss the latest from the world of football and very very interesting. We've just wrapped up the game between Al Hilal and Al Nassr, and Al Nassr have won that game by goal to nil to brighten their chances. To brighten their chances of winning the Saudi Pro League, league title. So they are one win away from clinching it. They beat Karim Benzema's Al Hilal in a very closely or highly contested game, as you would expect. Uh, to That's a first and second in as far as the Saudi Pro League is concerned. Hi, reluctant gamer. Good to have you on the broadcast. I hope you've had a wonderful day. Hope you're doing all right. So in tonight's broadcast, we'll talk about Sergio Ramos, who is close to, you know, completing the purchase of Sevilla, his former club, where he was handed his debut, I think in 2004, came through the ranks. Then we'll also get to talk about Ben White being ruled out for the remainder of the season. We'll also talk about the controversy surrounding Ousmane Dembele's accolade, which I told you about briefly yesterday, that he won as French League One Player of the Season. Meanwhile, the game between Atletico de Madrid and there's also a championship game in the playoffs between Southampton and Middlesbrough. It was 1-1 at halftime. As we speak, in the Spanish La Liga, we've already had some games, and as we speak, Atletico de Madrid are in action against Osasuna, and Atletico de Madrid are leading by a goal to nil, but there's a penalty appeal in that game against Atletico de Madrid. So we are waiting to see what the resultant check from the VAR could reveal subsequently. But the referee is yet to be summoned to the monitor, so we are waiting to see. We stand in waiting to see what the result will be there. Remember, and players like Anton Griezmann are playing their last games with the club, that's Atletico de Madrid. So, good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Robert Kesakos, and I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. For those of you that have just joined us, kindly like the broadcast, but also please consider subscribing to the channel if it is your first time here, and help us continue to grow. So basically, it's going to be a full week of action of football, one game after the other. Shalom, God bless you and your family from the Holy Land of Jerusalem. That is Rico. Hi Rico, good to have you on the broadcast. I hope you're doing okay. How is the Holy Land? The referee has been summoned to the pitchside monitor to investigate the matter further, and we'll see what decision it comes out. Possibly we could head into halftime with a or square. Walid says hi. Hi Walid. Where are you joining us from, Mr. Walid? It's good to have you on the broadcast. I hope you're doing okay. Apologies, guys. I was just trying to have a network test on my end, and then need to have audio is tested. I think the audio is good. The network is so far not bad. I think we're good to go. Oh, is it the goalkeeper that commits the foul? Oh, it's a clash of heads. Oh, he's rescinded the penalty. He's deemed it a clash of two players contesting for the ball, for the header. Two players contesting for the ball. One heads into the other, but as opposed to it being a foul on an Osasuna player by Joan Mosso. That's the Atletico de Madrid goalkeeper. So it remains 1-0 in favor of Atletico de Madrid there over in the Spanish La Liga. Remember, these midweek fixtures are meant to send us through match day 36 of the Spanish La Liga, and then over the weekend we'll be playing match day 37, and subsequently the league will climax, because remember, in the immediate aftermath of this particular season, we are going for the World Cup. So in the earlier games, you had Celta Vigo lose to Levante by 3-2, while Real Betis managed to beat up against Elche by a goal to nil. Sorry, by 2-1. Yes, Real Betis beat up against Elche by 2-1. And the action will continue tomorrow with Espanyol taking on Bilbao. Sevilla will be away to Villarreal. Barcelona will be away to Deportivo Aves, while Mallorca will be away to Getafe, among that. And then also in the French League One, we'll have two games, one kicking off at 8 p.m. between Brest and Strasbourg, while the other game will be between the table leaders playing away to RC Lens, who have been, for the majority of the season, been their title rivals. But PSG have already sealed the League One title, given their, superior goal difference, with a 6-point gap between them and second place RC Lens, with only 2 games to spare for both teams. Aiko Hada says hello from Japan. Ohayo gozaimasu. Hi, how are you doing? How is Japan? What part of Japan are you joining us from? I hope I've not murdered your language when I said that simple phrase. You say, how can you remember so much thing about football? What do you mean, how can I remember so much about football? Now, the honest bit about the sport is that there's a lot that I know, but there's also too much that I do not know. That's just about it. Because football as a discipline is so wide. It's so wide. I keep learning and unlearning where necessary every single day. I have to keep picking up on information that is relevant to my audience, or that I believe is worthy to help, but also that is of relevance to my individual self, in terms of helping shape my opinion about certain issues within the game before I bring it to you. I have to think through certain things, especially when it comes to the topics of discussion. Then for the things that you ask me generally, I'm honest enough to tell you if I do not know about something, that I have to go and read about it, and then I get back to you, or I'll give you my opinion based on the information that I may have available to me at that opportune moment. So that's just about it. So anyways, like I said, too much football coming your way. And then also tomorrow, there will be a game in the Premier League when Manchester City entertain Crystal Palace, but we'll get to discuss that one tomorrow morning in our morning broadcast. But with that said, where should we start it from? Let's start it with the news regarding Sergio Ramos. Now, Sergio Ramos is leading a consortium called 511 Capital, who are trying to pursue a deal to purchase Sevilla. Now, Sevilla have been in sort of turmoil, both financially as well as football-wise, in terms of how things have been going for them on and off the pitch. So it's not been a pretty sort of spell for them in a way, and a lot has happened. And as we speak this season, they've been one of the teams fighting against relegation. They've been one of those teams. So meanwhile, that game between Southampton and Middlesbrough has already resumed. Remember, it went into halftime 1-1. So whoever advances between the two sides, because this is the reverse fixture, the first leg ended in a goalless draw. Whoever advances will take on Hull City in the Championship playoff final that will take place on the 23rd of May. I think it will be a Saturday, the day before the climax of the Premier League at Wembley Stadium. It's arguably the most expensive game of football, not in terms of what you pay to go watch it, but in terms of the money that you earn yourself when you win it, worth £100 million. How that comes about is still a mystery. I'm trying to solve in my head, in my puzzle. Not the source of the funds, but what qualifies it to be that, you know, is for me always been, something of thought. Do you know if Messi and Neymar will be in the World Cup? I think for Lionel Messi, for as long as he's injury free, I think it's a given he will be at the World Cup. That's what I think. For Neymar, it will depend on how he trains, on how Brazil go through their test games that they're supposed to play prior to the tournament, and we'll go from there. Because at some point, I'd want to believe that a final squad will be named of about what, 23 to 25 players. Should be about that, if I'm not mistaken. I stand to be corrected if it's more, but around usually 23, 25. That's usually the sort of size of squad. So out of the 55, you have 30 players that have to be omitted from the current squad. Meanwhile, the referee has sent us into halftime for that game between Atletico de Madrid and Osasuna, with Atletico de Madrid leading by a goal to nil. So that is happening. So, anyways, that's football for you. It's been it's been a bit of an odd season for this Atletico de Madrid side. But a penalty from Ademola Lookman is what still separates the two sides. Atletico de Madrid simply pushing to finish within fourth place. I mean, they already have it secured, so it's just a formality. They're almost... Oh, wow. There's a penalty shot at in that championship playoff game. We'll see. But it's been dismissed quite quickly on. Sorry, guys, I have to juggle a couple of things. The Atletico de Madrid game just went into halftime. On this side, I have the championship game against Middlesbrough is also going on. So a lot is happening on my screen at the same time, or at least has been. And there are games that I've sacrificed that I've not had the opportunity to watch. So, anyways, so according to multiple reports, like I said, the club is valued at about at least north of 400 million euros. Some sources do suggest it's worth about 444 million euros, but it's not a definitive figure. And Sergio Ramos, like I said, leading the consortium called 511 Capital, with his brother called, I think, known as Rene, are leading the process and are waiting for official and formal steps with lawyers before a statement. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. I mean, it will be a huge milestone for Sergio Ramos, because, like I said, this is a club that handed him his a La Liga debut back in 2004, before he later switched to Real Madrid. And you remember he was a right back, and then eventually turned into a center back, and one of the best there has been in as far as the game is concerned. So that is what is happening in as far as that front is concerned, or in as far as the acquisition of Sevilla is concerned. For quite some time, they've been struggling financially. Like I said, when you look at the La Liga standings, they are 13th on the La Liga table with 40 points, and that is only 3 points above the 19th place team on the La Liga standings. Now, with 3 games left to play for some teams, because remember, some play tomorrow, and 2 games left for some to play, you can make the case that the up to the 10th place and below are all in the relegation battle, apart from Rio Oviedo, who have already confirmed their place in the Segunda Division. Rio Dandy says, hello, Rio Dandy. Good to have you back on the podcast. I hope you're doing well and that everything is going on well with you thus far. So really, it's I think Sevilla and Valencia have all been in tatters for quite some time now. We're talking about the Sevilla side who won the Spanish La Liga title in 2002 and in 2004. That Valencia side that were under the charges of Rafael Benitez Maudes before he left to join Liverpool, and it was really, really an interesting side that we had at the time. And you remember, they had players like Santiago Canares, defenders like Roberto Ayala, Ruben Baraja, David Albelalda, those sort of players, So in a way, Sevilla is a big club, one that you cannot underestimate, one that you cannot simply write off. In years before Atletico Madrid's resurgence to the top, Sevilla and Valencia were always the clubs that we expected to try and challenge Barcelona and Real Madrid's dominance. Of course, they were not always doing it to great effect, but at least they gave you a semblance of competition, But it's without a doubt that there's a lot of miles between some of those teams and the other two giants in Barcelona and Real Madrid, Oh, missed opportunity for Middlesbrough. Okay, Rio Dandy says, where do you think Xabi Alonso will end up? Increasingly, chances do point that he could end up at Chelsea. However, nothing is determined yet. There's a feeling on my part that Chelsea are holding on, fast-tracking that deal, waiting to hear from Andoni Iraola. But chances are really high that he could end up at Chelsea. And I think Chelsea would be a good project for him. The question, however, for me is, will he be accorded the time? Because a lot of us think that just because he moved from Real Sociedad B and went to Bayer Leverkusen in October 2022 and literally pulled the team from the doldrums and oversaw them finishing sixth on the Bundesliga table and qualifying for Europa League football, that essentially it's supposed to be the same magic everywhere he goes. No, it cannot be the same. Circumstances are going to be different. The set of players are different. We cannot discuss talent pound for pound, but there's talent, there's maturity. You'd be walking into a Chelsea side that has a lot of young players. So it's not a given. You say, I think Chelsea might go for Cesc Fabregas. I do not think Cesc Fabregas is going to leave Como after guiding them to their first European season. Remember, Cesc Fabregas is part owner of Como, alongside with the likes of Thierry Henry, among others. So his heart is where his money is. There's that as well. So for an upcoming manager, yes, I would understand the desire maybe to go a step further and move on to maybe a slightly better or bigger club. But switching from Como to Chelsea is the equivalent of coming from one extreme end to another. It can be challenging. I'm not saying it cannot be done. But there's, among us his camp, and as equally reported by Ben Jacobs, there's this feeling that he could, that he does not want to leave Como, as well as the case is for Francesco Ferraioli at FC Porto. There's an understanding or a sort of contentment that he will stay at FC Porto, at least or in Portugal for now. So there's that. Hi, Pedri. Good to have you back on the broadcast. It's been a minute. I understand you've been busy with perhaps school. Adash says, hi, African Sun. Hi, Adash. Good to have you back. Always a pleasure. It warms my heart when I see familiar faces reunite with us every single day, Whereas I'm not a shop, I'd want to use the analogy of a shopkeeper who has a routine customer. So you guys pass for my routine customers, and I appreciate you a great deal, more than you think. Rio Dandy says, I really want Cesc Fabregas in Chelsea. I really like his playing style as a manager and when he was a player too. Okay, I mean, I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it time and again. as football fans, we always have our preferences for our respective teams in regards to what we think they need or what they must be having for them to succeed. We all want our teams to succeed. I think that's a given. But as we exercise that or as we think about that, we also ought to remember that we do not always get what we want. Allow me use the example as and I hope you get to view it in the objective sense in which it comes, regardless of my allegiances. I take myself back to the year 2018. Arsene Wenger has announced he will be leaving the club at the end of the season. At that stage, or at that point, we, in normal everyday fans conversation, in different small groups, at places where I watch the game from, at random stopovers, etc., etc., it was a talk of town in as far as Arsenal are concerned. Who is worth their salt in replacing a man like Arsene Charles Wenger? There was no easy answer to that. But nonetheless, they were contenders for the job. In my humble opinion at the time, in no particular order, I made a case for managers like Antonio Conte. I made a case for managers like Maximiliano Allegri. I made a case for managers like Erik ten Hag. At the time, still at Ajax. There was talk of Jose Mourinho, but I was not in support of Jose Mourinho. I understood those that were of the opinion that Jose Mourinho should be a contender for the job, but I was not so into him because of overall playing style. Arsene Wenger, even when you see a lot of people criticizing Arsenal or Mikel Arteta and his, maybe playing tactics, it's because they have that image of Arsene Wenger that, regardless of the circumstances, he played that fluid, attacking, ball domination football. Pass it, more like not tic-tac to the T the way Barcelona did it under Pep Guardiola or Bayern Munich or Manchester City at some point, but that sort of, we used to call it kawo, or that's what Arsenal were known for, that smooth and very entertaining sort of football. And of course, Jose Mourinho was never in that shade. Then eventually, Diego Simeone was a key candidate. And I was rooting for Diego Simeone as well as a candidate. I appreciated the fact that Diego Simeone's style of football was always going to be different from what we had come to know of Arsenal and Arsene Wenger. I understood that and respected it. Nonetheless, I felt that Diego Simeone had a certain level of flexibility to adapting his style, maybe to try and play the Arsenal way, than Jose Mourinho could ever do. That's where I thought maybe, but also the mentality, that hardcore sort of rock and roll kind of mentality. When I say rock and roll, you guys who love rock music, know it's hardcore, So I thought about that at the time, Those are some of the things that I did consider at the time. So, guys, Rio Dandy, I'm going to get to your other comment as well as Adash. Indulge me as I complete this, you're trying your best to persuade a career in giving valuable information regarding the game of soccer. Thank you so much, Adash, for that compliment. I'll take it in the most positive spirit that it does come. So, I looked at it in that sense, and those were my top candidates. Then fast forward, as news comes thick and fast, all those options, for some reason, were out of the window. Thomas Tuchel was another name that we also discussed at the time. We knew that as much as Arsenal fans would be of the preference to get Pep Guardiola, we were never going to get him out of Manchester City. I think he had just completed his, second season with Manchester City. And he had won the league title. Now, never had I thought that Unai Emery was a contender. Later on, Mikel Arteta, who was little known to the coaching world, beyond him being a former Arsenal captain and an assistant to Pep Guardiola at the time. And even, by the way, about that, we learned much later, after Unai Emery had been, given the job, that Mikel Arteta was one of the top candidates that were being considered at the time. Now, I seem to remember, and I stand to be corrected if I get the timing right, the timing wrong, but it was around the same time when we got Raul Sanllehi into the club, and he made a case for Unai Emery. And Unai Emery, at the interview, impressed with his expansive video analysis and his understanding of Arsenal players that were part of that squad at the time. So eventually, or fast forward, he does land the job, and he starts to do the job. I thought he had an incredible first season, by the way. Arsenal finished fifth on the Premier League log. I think they were just a few points shy of achieving Champions League football. He took them to the finals of the UEFA Europa League, and they lost to Chelsea by 4-1. It was a painful loss, almost it was nothing short of an embarrassment, given that Arsenal were playing against their direct rivals. So going into his second season, and the reason as why, by the way, I do never entirely personally blame Unai Emery for what went wrong for him at Arsenal, was that there was this overall expectation that because he was experienced and that he had managed Sevilla, managed PSG, that suddenly he was going to convert Arsenal quickly into this title contender. And yet that couldn't be much further from what was realistic at the time. Of course, when you also look at some of the players that were recruited around the same period, you realize that we're in the trenches. We went for Socrates Pastatopoulos from Borussia Dortmund. The Greek centre-back was in the evenings of his career. We went and signed a free agent in Stefan Lichtsteiner after he left Juventus. Then we brought in youngsters like Matteo Guendouzi. Lucas Torreira had impressed at the World Cup 2018 with the Uruguay national team, particularly in the Uruguay's game, I think, against Portugal. Among other players, we got Kieran Tierney from Celtic for about £25 million, and it felt worth it. But when you go back and assess the overall quality of the squad, there were some excellent players: Mesut Ozil, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Alexander Lacazette, but we also had inefficient players, the likes of Shkodran Mustafi, among others. So that was the type of team that it was. So when we talk about, and then when we talk about fast forward, bringing in, and then he eventually is sacked, and then they bring in Mikel Arteta. When he gets sacked, and they bring in Mikel Arteta, again, once Unai Emery got sacked, I went back to the earlier options that I had in mind and made the case for them once again, to say we could not afford to get it wrong this time around, that we needed to get it right. Not in a million years had I thought that Arsenal had the cogence of going to Manchester City and pick out Pep Guardiola's assistant, a rookie who, that's like being tossed into the deep end. It's like getting your 4-year-old son who has never swum before but has only played in a basin and maybe beyond that a bathtub in your guidance with your supervision, and then you toss them into a pool. Even if it were a kid's pool, they have not swum before. But this one would have been an adult pool, because you're getting a rookie manager in Mikel Arteta and plugging him into an Arsenal team. Arsenal is a big team. It's a gigantic team, a global brand of football. So the weight of that, to have it on the rookie shoulders of a manager, is not something I thought he would cope well with. And I do not think anybody in any part of the world would have been surprised if, let's say, Mikel Arteta was sacked after just 1 year in charge. I do not think that would have surprised anybody. The case would have been simple: inexperienced, never done this before, he's not managed anywhere. What were they thinking appointing him? But the one thing they afforded him is time. Up until this day, the biggest commodity that Arsenal have afforded Mikel Arteta is time. That's the biggest opportunity. You go back in his debut half season and he wins the FA Cup when they beat Chelsea 2-1 in the final. I think Christian Pulisic scored for Chelsea, while Alexander Lacazette scored for the Arsenal. Sorry, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Then beyond that, he's not won anything since. In his first full season, of course, ending that season, they finished 8th on the Premier League globe. And so did they in his first full campaign. That was 2020-2021, predominantly known as the COVID-19 season. So, whether it is Francesco Sola Fabregas, whether it's Xabi Alonso or Xavi Hernandez, the question is, are Chelsea going to afford that person time? Because they need time. Time is a very, very important aspect. And I often reflect on that, on those bad days of Mikel Arteta in his first debut full season. And I thought, now I've always thought to myself, if the fans were coming to the stadium every week in, week out, don't you think the pressure on him would have been much more from the fans? That maybe they were going to be booed at every end of the game? Because he had that spell of 10 games where he only won one game, beating Man United by 0-0. That penalty by Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. So in that sort of sense. So Rio Dandy, you say, I really want Cesc Fabregas in Chelsea. I really like you like his playing style and who he was as a player. I appreciate that. So in explaining all that, as trying to drive 2 points home, that one, as fans, we do not always get what we want or what we would have preferred when it comes to these decisions, as is the case when it comes to the acquisition of players. But then there also are the question that are trying to preempt is what would it require for any manager in the realms of Cesc Fabregas that they would need to succeed at Chelsea. Time is an important element. Oftentimes, you feel that club owners are playing to the gallery. As soon as the manager stumbles, our fans are up in arms. Social media is like social media, it's on fire. And before you know it, they cave in. Their conviction in the person they appointed quickly diminishes and they sack them. Okay, allow me move on. Where is Xavi? Are there any updates on Iniesta's manager training? I've not heard anything about Iniesta, but Xavi is there without a job. He's open to taking a job in the Premier League. Chelsea have discussed Xavi. Reports earlier this week or late last week had suggested that Chelsea had reached out to his representatives and had preliminary conversations, but conversations did not go deep. That's Xavi Hernandez. You're trying your best to persuade a career in giving valuable information regarding the game of soccer. Yeah, every day I'm challenging myself to learn from people with whom I share the same spaces with. Every day I challenge myself to try and read or take in as much information as I can. And sometimes it feels that there's very little time to take it all in, but I do my best so that I keep bettering myself. If there's one of the things I really want is self-improvement. I love the criticism when somebody says, and I love the constructive criticism or feedback, not necessarily criticism, but the feedback for somebody to tell me, you do this right, you need to improve in that area, do that. I love that guidance. And it doesn't matter from whom it is coming from. Learning is a process. It's an everyday thing for me. So thank you so much, Adash, for those kind words. Rio Dandy says, where does Frank Lampard manage now? Was he good as a Chelsea manager? He's currently at Coventry City. He's just guided them to a Premier League promotion after, I think, about a season and a half of being in charge of them. Now, Frank Lampard did well at Chelsea in his debut, a spell. And I think the first season they finished, was it 4th or 5th? It was the subsequent season where things burnt his hands. First of all, they went on and bought him these experienced players. Eduardo Mendy, Kalidou Koulibaly, that group of players. And I think he failed to manage that group of players. Before he knew it, or before you knew it, he was in and out of his depth. He's eventually sacked when the club were ninth, I think, on the league standings at the time. And they brought in Thomas Tuchel, who then eventually guides the team to the UEFA Champions League title. So when you look at, I think he's the kind of manager you'd say was good, but also a little bit out of his depth. I mean, it's Chelsea. It's not easy. What he had as an advantage going for him was that he was a Chelsea legend, or he is a Chelsea legend. Therefore, he had the respect. He had the respect of the dressing room as a guy that has hacked it at Chelsea before, and that can be quite valuable. You know, it's one of the things that Mikel Arteta had on his side, that in his lack of experience, because at least by the time Frank Lampard joins Chelsea, he had managed at Derby County. So he had a little bit of experience at a club like Derby County, but Mikel Arteta did not have any. So on the other side, so in using that experience of having played for the team, having captained that team, you sort of give yourself the opportunity to have a say in the dressing room where you have respect of those players. They'll respect you, you know, because you played for that club before, you know what it takes to play for that club and things like that. So he had that respect for him. Remember, when you go back to 2015, in December, when the club parts ways with Jose Mourinho, Steve Holland took over for briefly, and then Gusidi came in. He came in as caretaker manager, was interim until the end of the season. And then they brought in Antonio Conte. When Antonio Conte comes through, he wins the league in his debut campaign, 2016-2017. Then the subsequent season, he's fired. That is 2017-2018. He's fired, or they part ways with the club. He completed the season, but they part ways with Chelsea. So he was there between 2016 and 2018. And then they brought in Maurizio Sarri from Napoli. You remember the guy who used to smoke? He comes in and he handles the club for only 1 year, 2018-2019. And that's when the club brings in Frank James Lampard from Derby County. So he goes through the 2019-2021 league season, where you can argue that he did well. You know, you can argue that he did well. So the club finished fourth with 66 points, which was good. I think he had done well. Now they wanted to go for more. Now, in going for more, that's when things never worked out. And eventually, they had to part ways with him. Of course, that is in January 2021, and then Thomas Tuchel comes in, and eventually they finish fourth again. So fast forward September 2022, they part ways with Thomas Tuchel. You know, so that's been the story of Chelsea. Oh, and that's Frank Lampard. Now, when he leaves the club, of course, he went on to manage at Everton. Things did not work out. Then they brought in, when Tuchel is sacked, they bring Graham Potter from Brighton. That was very early on in the season, around September 8th, 2022. By April, they've sacked him. And there's a guy called Bruno Solta, handled Chelsea for about a week. And then Frank Lampard returned for his second stint as an interim until the end of the season. That was April to June. If you remember that period, it was so shambolic. He lost so many games. And then that's when Mauricio Pochettino comes in for one season before Enzo Maresca. So the one thing they ought to do, or that I feel, is they need to give time to manage this. But I hope I've answered your Lampard question. Joshua says, we've got bigger dudes to kiss, bro. I don't know what you try to imply with that, but I'll leave the comment as is because it does not appear to be football related. Anyways, the Atletico de Madrid game is also back for the second stanza. Meanwhile, we are into stoppage time for that game between Southampton and Middlesbrough as we speak. So things are happening quite thick and fast there. Milton says, hi, Robert. Sorry, just joined. It's all right. Good to have you on the broadcast. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you've been all right. I think I've not seen you for the last 2 broadcasts or something, but I hope you're doing okay. So, anyways, briefly away from Chelsea, allow me to digress back because you see the thing about doing these discussions with you is that I cannot impose my topics on you. I ought to respect what you demand to impart here because you, the audience, matter than any of my topics that I may have come up in head. So allow me to digress back to the situation to do with Sergio Ramos. Like I said, Sergio Ramos is leading the 511 Capital, a consortium that want to purchase Sevilla for about 40 million euros plus. If he does seal that deal, he will be joining Lionel Messi, who in April this year completed the acquisition of a Spanish club from the Catalonia region called Conella. Yes, it's called Conella. And then also earlier on this year, Cristiano Ronaldo bought 25% stake in a Spanish side or in the Segunda Division called Almeria. And of course, in addition to that, you have Thierry and Cesc Fabregas who have shares in a club like Como. I don't remember particularly, but Ronaldo Nazario Dadima had a club in Spain. So he would be joining a cohort of other former footballers or great sportsmen who have acquired football clubs. There's also, I don't know, no, he's not a sportsman. He's Michael B. Jordan, the film actor from the USA. He's a shareholder with Bournemouth, Hit the Road says, is this relatable to anyone? It should be. But how hit the road? Hit the road, Jack. Sounds like a statement. Sounds like you're telling yourself something, Jack. It reminds me of that series called, is it My Summer with the Walters, something like that? Or The Summer I Turned Pretty. One of those 2 series, or TV shows. So anyways, there's that. So that's to do with Sevilla. We can pack it aside and then move on to the other topic. The other topic involves Arsenal because earlier on today, it was revealed that Ben White had suffered an injury. Okay. We know he was forced off through injury in their 1-0 victory against West Ham United over the weekend. That was around the 28th minute of the game. And as soon as he went down, when you saw the amount of pain that he was in, you felt for the worst. You sort of felt that he was not going to return. And reports were confirmed today after tests that he suffered a suspected MCL, that's, I think, a meniscus cruciate ligament injury, something like that. And his season is as good as done. You're not going to see him back in Arsenal colours this season. There's also concern that he could miss the World Cup through injury. So according to David Ornstein, he said Arsenal defender Ben White expected to miss rest of the season with knee ligament injury. 28-year-old England international suffered a suspected MCL damage in the AFC victory against West Ham, though full extent is yet to be established. And I think that says it all. So for me, And I remember watching him go, and my worry because he walked off the pitch in the guidance of a physio holding him, and you could see how he was limping with that knee. And I felt for the worst. I said, not another bad injury, Ben, because he's had knee surgery before, you know. And he's one of those loyal players, a very sort of great players. First of all, it's very unfortunate for Ben White to suffer this kind of injury at this stage of the season. It wasn't too long back that he had returned from injury, you know, and he was starting to sort of find his footing in the game, and he's had to go back to the sick bay. But more importantly, because he was summoned at the previous England national team, you never know what would have happened if he had not gotten injured. Maybe, just maybe. Meanwhile, the game between Southampton and Middlesbrough has gone into extra time, or is going into extra time. If he had not suffered that injury, who knows what would have happened? Hi, Bono. Let me get your comment in a bit. I hope you're doing okay. You know? Okay. Let me read the comment. Bono says, Sino Bono says, good morning, brother. I'm off to work. God bless you, brother. Okay. Thank you so much, Sino Bono. Good luck at work and safe journey. So really, okay, just a second. I was having something fixed here. You know, when you're following up on games and multiple games that one keeps ending, the other keeps starting, it can off. Budmia just forced one more so into a save. Brilliant save. Almost a static header. Ball is floated in. He stands still and he heads it on target. Unfortunately for him, it was close to the goalkeeper. So anyways, still about Ben White, like I said, it's very, very unfortunate, especially when you reflect on the kind of season that he's had, one that has been troubled by injuries. And as a football player, a professional football player, that's the last thing you want to be dealing with. And because it's a World Cup year, who knows? Maybe you would have gotten lucky and get someone to the England national team. Remember at the previous international break, there's a defender that pulled out of the England national team and he was replaced by Ben White. So I would have loved for him to stay fit. But also on the Arsenal side, that means they do not have Ben White, they do not have Jurgen Timber ahead of the season showdown. They have the next game against Burnley at home. That will be next week on Monday Night Football. And then the subsequent Sunday against Crystal Palace before the UEFA Champions League final on May the 30th. Those are three very, very important games of football. Three very, very important games of football. So it's not that Arsenal are out of options, because they can conjure out something. Even if it would mean to play Declan Rice there, they would do that. They have Christian Mosquera. But when you're getting to the business end of the season, ideally you would have loved to have your top players to be available. Jurgen Timber should have returned to action by now, but apparently suffered a setback sometime in March. And then they've been trying to push him, but then to be ready, and he felt a bit of a discomfort. There's something that you ought to be very cautious about when it comes to a groin injury. It's what has troubled Cole Palmer through the season. Lamine Yamal has been suspect to that, although currently he's out with a hamstring and things like that. So they do not have Jurgen Timber, or have not had him for quite some time. And his backup in Ben White is equally out. So now that means by hook or crook, regardless of what their preferences are, they have to play their Christian Mosquera. Christian Mosquera has been quite the revelation of a defender. But forget not, he does prefer to be a centre back than he would be a right back. Nonetheless, he will have to play there because that's a requirement. And you cannot have a bigger stake than a league title when you're faced with these such situations. Milton says Arsenal will be missing another player now. Exactly. And for me, the concerning thing or the take from this is what I've been saying literally all throughout the entire season. Literally, every game of football that Arsenal played have literally walked away with the player injured. According to Mikel Arteta, Carafio was withdrawn at halftime. Was it? I think because of some form of injury or discomfort or knock. Every game they've played, they've ended up losing a player, either to a knock or something. They've struggled to have a very consistent starting 11 all throughout the season. You then remember the fact that Bukayo Saka is currently playing under injury. A lot of people do not know that. But he has that Achilles injury, the Achilles tendinopathy, and they've been managing him. That's why you see they've been very intentional on the number of minutes he plays. Over the weekend, he played more minutes than he had played in the previous two games against Fulham and against Atletico de Madrid in the Champions League. But it still felt a bit forced. I don't know if you've observed, every time they passed the ball to Saka into space, he was sort of hesitant. In other words, he never went for a sprint. And I remember, meanwhile, Atletico de Madrid have found the second goal they've scored. I think it's Alexander Soroth who scored to make it 2-0. Excuse me. Yes, very careful with Saka, and it affects him as well. So now, whenever they played the ball in space, he hesitated to do the sprint, and it felt intentional. There was one scenario where they passed the ball and he had a loose fast touch, and he thought it had gone beyond him, and that the West Ham player was going to run onto it and get there fast. So he hesitated to run to it. But eventually he realizes that guy is not going to get there before I get there, even regardless of whether I'm going to, even if I'm not going to sprint. So, and he runs after the ball and he gets to it. So you almost sense a caution about him in how he operates off the ball and once the ball is played to him into space. You can see that he's hesitant to do the sprints. Now, I don't know if the not doing the sprints are attached to the Achilles injury or there's something to do with his hamstring that he does not want to risk. Remember, as much as he's a very crucial player for the Arsenal, he's in the same respect of measure, or even more, a critical player for the England national team. So Arsenal are very aware of that. They wouldn't want to cost him a World Cup of football. But they have to deal with it anyway because their wingers have been very, very less productive. Zebulu says, I am actually trying to forget that football exists right now. Zebulu, hi Zebulu, where are you joining us from? What team do you support? And where are you joining us from? Just hearing Arsenal gives me trauma. I'd want to assume, and I hope I'm wrong, that one, you're a West Ham United fan, or you're a Liverpool fan. There I was going to go on. Either you're a West Ham fan, a Manchester City fan. Otherwise, as a Liverpool fan, what bond do you have to pick with Arsenal? Indulge me. Let me understand. What is it about Arsenal that you dread or that has caused you the trauma? Because Liverpool are not in the title race, so Arsenal's results had zero significance to Liverpool or against Liverpool or for Liverpool. I do not think there's anything they've done to cost Liverpool. In fact, Liverpool is the only team, is one of the few teams in the Premier League not to have lost to Arsenal this season, because it was a goalless draw in the reverse fixture, and the other was a 1-0 victory for Liverpool. Man City beat Arsenal 2-1, and the other was a 1-1 draw. Style of play is garbage. Wow, that's an interesting take. Anyway, it's one man's opinion, right? That's your perception of them or your interpretation of them. But I'm sure a lot of people would argue otherwise. Epstein was my uncle, says hi. You people play too much. Jeffrey Epstein, or there's some other Epstein that you're referring to? Because the Jeffrey Epstein that I've heard of is a very, very infamous man. He's a very unpopular figure in different corners of the world, So, meanwhile, there's a VAR check in this game for Atletico de Madrid against Osasuna. Everything is clear. Everything is clear. Nothing to worry. Let's any news around? Not much apart from the championship game between Southampton and Middlesbrough. That one is into extra time now. It's still 1-1. It's the second leg, so they have to find a winner. The first leg ended in a goalless draw. So whoever advances has to play Hull City in the championship playoff final, which is the most expensive game of football. I was here asking my audience, Gladiator, when you joined us, I've never understood why the championship playoff final is the most expensive game of football that there is. I mean, the winner gets what, £100 million to spend. And sometimes every time I think about that, it reminds me of the sharp contrast between football finances within UK's elite side of football and that of the rest of the world. Because in the UK, it's not all rosy. There are clubs that are struggling financially. Sheffield Wednesday, among others, down there in the lower leagues, that have their issues. And Leicester City have had their problems with finances, etc., etc. But when it comes to teams playing in the Premier League and relatively in the Championship, the resources are there. And just imagine what £100 million could mean for a team like Lazio, what it could mean for a team like Atlanta, what it could mean for a team like Bologna, what it could mean for a team like Girona, for Sevilla, for Valencia, present day, for Real Betis, that kind of thing, that kind of money. And that's why you get teams that are just promoted from the Championship competing for players from, let's say, the Italian Serie A, from the French League One, with better teams in the Spanish La Liga. You'll find that, let's assume that Hull City qualifies or wins the championship playoff final and they get the £100 million. They'll be competing for the same player that Atalanta wants to sign. And then the player will sign sometimes for Hull City. Why? Because they can afford to pay the wages. So it's something that I've always wanted to understand. Okay, Gladiator says, I do not know how Millwall lost to Hull. I mean, I did not watch that game, but anything can happen in football, really. That's why English Premiership is too dominant is to dominate for long. I mean, yeah, it it will continue to dominate in terms of brand, in terms of competition domestically, and among other things. And when it comes to the other relative clubs that you'd ideally want to be at the same level, are beyond the confines of English football. You know, you said that money comes from the deals signed for live coverage and the FA. I mean, it's just a single game. Like, I understand it can attract those finances, but I mean, a UEFA Champions League winner never takes that as prize money. Never takes that as prize money. A lot of elite leagues, the winner does not get that amount of money. When they clinch the league title in the form of prize money, forget the money that comes through commercial revenue, like advertising and broadcast revenue, etc., etc. Forget that, but prize money, because that is prize money, £100 million for grabs. So let me ask, what is more valuable, qualifying directly or playing and winning a championship final? I know it's a big bet. It's a huge gamble that you can easily risk missing out. But every time I hear that money, I'm thinking to myself, don't some teams want just to play this? Imagine if they had, let's say, the model that they have in Germany, where is it the third team from the bottom plays a playoff game with the third team from the bottom. Imagine what that would mean if, let's say, in this particular case, a West Ham or a Tottenham Hotspurs were the ones going to play maybe a Hull City or a Southampton in a playoff sort of game. And then you have a team like West Ham or Tottenham winning that game, and they have to go away with £100 million. What it would mean for their significance in terms of going into next season. So, I mean, football financing, I mean, that money is huge money. I know it's the cost of one player eventually for big clubs like Arsenal, like Chelsea, but for those mid-table clubs, it really tells you how a club like Nottingham Forest, you remember when they are just under their promotion, I think you have to go back in 2022, when they were still under Steve Cooper, how they brought in about 23 players in their debut season in the Premier League just to try and survive, So it's quite interesting that way. Okay, you say actually, Sunderland goes all the way to bring Granit Xhaka, of this world into a newly promoted Sunderland. Yes, that transfer is what epitomizes this debate. Granit Xhaka is playing for a team like the stature of Bayer Leverkusen, who just yesterday were Bundesliga champions, that are going to play in the Champions League. And Sunderland come around, and it feels like he does not have to think too hard about it, because in seasons gone by, it's almost felt like a given that every team, all the three teams that get promoted from the Championship, are the teams that are going to get relegated for some time. But then he takes a bet on himself that I'm going to go to this Sunderland side and we'll try and push for a Premier League stay. Yes, they've achieved it. It's a huge gamble on his part. But also, remember, it's not because there was an interest from other bigger clubs. Other clubs wanted to sign him, but he chose Sunderland. So that's quite very telling. Verstappen says hello. Hello, Verstappen. So it's quite very, very telling, it's quite very telling when it comes to that. So what's the prize money for a Champions League winner? Let's, because last I checked, it had, at the time in the old format, it was about 64 million pounds, I think. That's what it used to be. Now that things have changed, I know that clubs, they improved the money when it comes to your winning bonuses. For example, every game you win in the Champions League, you get about, I think, 2.1 million euros. And for every game you draw, you get about 750,000 euros. So the winner earns about 25 million euros as in addition to everything that you've earned through. So you can imagine. And that's why Man United were desperately wanted to get back in Champions League football, because that means you can average making 100 million pounds from the Champions League. And if you do that consistently over 4 to 5 seasons, that's almost £500 million. And it can go a long way in helping you rebuild your squad. It then takes me to the conversation I was having here with GFT when he asked me a question. If Mikel Arteta doesn't win anything this season, should he be sacked? And I said, if you sack him, who do you bring? But also, if you want to part ways with him because he has not won the league title, is it all that matters to his bosses, or the balance sheet also matters? Because they've played Champions League football for now 3 consecutive seasons. And therefore, there's revenue coming into the club. So his bosses, yes, they want the league, the titles, and that's the ultimate success. But there's also other forms of success. And that's the financial bit of it, because those guys are businessmen, the guys that own these football clubs. So that was, in part, my argument about the curious case of Mikel Arteta if he doesn't win anything. Of course, my feeling is that he maybe because you see, competing and not winning takes a toll on you, or can easily drain you, or take so much from you. So maybe he sort of chooses to step down as opposed to being sacked. But as we speak, even before the season ends, his bosses have already initiated contract talks. However, he requested that they be shelved for now until the end of the season. Okay, let me get some of these comments. Gladiator, you say, okay, no. Verstappen says, hello, says, remember me? Yes, I do. Verstappen said, do. What's that? Milton said, I think the stakes are high for a championship club to get promoted. Okay. Kylian Mbappe thinking about quitting Madrid. That is not love after the 50 million signatures to leave the club. Wow. I mean, I do not want to believe that all people that have appended their signatures on that petition are Real Madrid fans. But nonetheless, the one thing we cannot dismiss or disqualify is that they are even if it's just 10%. Let's say, how many people by now have signed? You cite 50 million. Only 10% of 50 million is what? 5 million, right? That's huge. So assume, let's say, the other 45 are, let's say, Barcelona fans, other fans from elsewhere around the world that do not wish Real Madrid well. 5 million is too much for fans to say, no, we do not want Kylian Mbappe here as fans. And as a player, when you sit back in isolation of yourself in your quiet place, maybe in your bathroom moment or in your soul searching moment, you cannot help ignore having that thought say, looks like I'm not loved here, or at least I'm not appreciated enough here, or people think I'm the problem. But then the big question is, if he leaves Real Madrid, then where does he go? Because he's going to be expensive. First of all, Real Madrid paid him expensively in sign-on fees. He's on very high wages. So they would want to recoup some of that money. And ordinarily, for a player of his quality, he should be costing no less than 120 million pounds. Actually, no less than 140 million pounds if Alexander Isak cost 125 last summer. So you're thinking 140 million pounds, the bare minimum. Meaning it could go to as high as 200 million pounds. Let's forget not, Neymar cost 220 million euros. That was his release clause, I think, from Barcelona to PSG. Remember when he was leaving Monaco to join PSG, bought quite expensively. So he's worth that. Which club is going to cough that amount of money? And does Real Madrid, let's say if they were to bring themselves around to the idea of losing him, for the very reasons that we are citing, which club would want to touch him? Because who says that we do not spend 200 million pounds on him, and a year down the road or 2 years down the road, we find ourselves in the same spot that Real Madrid found themselves in? It becomes a whole Pandora box to think about. It becomes that. It becomes very hard to think about in that respect. And yet, it's an unavoidable conversation that we ought to have. You just cannot stomach that idea. And maybe if you're willing to be hard-skinned, maybe somebody that cares about you, maybe your parent or your partner is saying, I think we need to leave this place. The question would be, what's the next destination? Okay. Milton says Arteta must win a trophy, otherwise he will be under pressure, no doubt. Yeah, he's already under pressure. That is without a doubt. But the question I was trying to answer at the time, now, if he doesn't win anything, I've already said this should be his final season if he doesn't win anything. But also, I ask myself the question, if not him, who? Because when you look at elite managers, they are there, but are they readily available to make the switch? A lot of people admire Luis Enrique. I think PSG are going to be desperate to keep him. You'd admire Hansi Flick. He's just extended his contract with Barcelona until June 2028 with an option to, I think, extend it. No, and with an option to extend it for a further year. And he said Barcelona would be his last job in club football. Are you going to go for Jurgen Klopp? If his words are anything to live by, he said he will never manage any other club in the Premier League other than Liverpool. You're not going to get a Pep Guardiola. It's not impossible, but it doesn't feel like it can happen, especially for him to cross from Man City to move to an Arsenal. Are you going to get a Carlo Ancelotti? Does he feel like a good fit? I do not know. So, as you think of if it doesn't win, you need to get. Apologies for the internet glitch. I don't know. I think I don't know if my Wi-Fi just went out or expired, but yeah. I don't know what just happened. I'll need to cross-check after the broadcast. Let me check. Last I checked, it was supposed to expire when? Tomorrow at 9 something. Not at this opportune time. Not at this opportune time. Let me see. This was yesterday, 10 a.m. yesterday, which is today. No, okay, yesterday as in, yeah, yesterday as in yesterday. Yesterday being Tuesday. Today is Wednesday now. Okay, my account should be fine. My account should be fine. I don't know. Anyway, it's MTN being MTN. It's just MTN being MTN. They've done that all throughout the week. Okay, let's revert back to the conversation. So, like I was saying, you ought to find yourself that question, the answer to that question before you make any conclusions. So, anyways, let's look to wrap this one up before internet gives up on us again. I'll keep checking and to see if it's back on again. But come on, looks like it's not the case. My Wi-Fi has given up on me. So you'll indulge me if we wrap this one up. Okay, but before we do, I need to go through all those comments. I feel for Mbappe, that was for Milton. Then you said if Mbappe was up for grabs at Arsenal, him, Kivicha, who do you take? Wow, that's a hot take. Yeah, I'm back, but I don't know. For some reason, my Wi-Fi is off. I think MTN is either having issues or they've decided to terminate me early. But to the best of my knowledge, my account should be expiring at least tomorrow. It should be, Thursday actually, Thursday. But they've done me dirty. But they've done that before during the course of a broadcast. It's not the first time that's happened. Anyway, so if Mbappe was up for grab at Arsenal and him and Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, who would I take? Obviously, in terms of talent, in terms of pedigree, clearly Mbappe is the better player. But for the health of your dressing room, you're better off with Kivicha Kvaratskhelia. For the health of your dressing room. Remember, Mikel Arteta is the kind of guy of the non-negotiables. He wants people that are drilled into his ideas, into his discipline, his way of doing things. You let once, twice, thrice, he's not going to take it. He's going to want to push you out. He's going to want to freeze you out. Now, when you're dealing with a player like Kylian Mbappe, with all his ego and all his stardom, the dynamics can sort of quickly shift. And you do not want that sort of player that could have that level of influence on other players in the dressing room because of his talent and stardom. So talent-wise, I acknowledge Kylian Mbappe would be the better player, would be the better value for money, would be because he's going to contribute to club merchandising and the overall club branding and etc. and everything you would want to think about on the commercial side of the game. For the club, he will contribute enormously to that. But then the question is, what are the implications of having him in the dressing room beyond what he gives you on the pitch? What he gives you on the pitch will never be without question. But how about when things are not going right? Is he going to influence your dressing room in a positive way or in a negative way? You know? So when you look at it in that context, you sort of feel that it will be an easy choice to choose Kivicha Kvaratskhelia over Kylian Mbappe. Because the goals that you could get from Mbappe, the individual, you can't collectively get from other talented players if you play a certain way. Okay, Milton says no. Andrew Muthon says Barcelona 2, Real Madrid 0. Yeah, that was on Sunday in the El Clasico. And Andre Muthon said hi. Hi, Andre Muthon. I can see. Okay, guys. Okay. Solar Dude says hi. Hi, Solar Dude. I'm having to revert to a different device to read your comments. Ash is back with us, says after Mbappe came, the jersey and the tissue paper sales both have been recorded all-time high. Jesus Christ. R4G XE1 says, hi sir, you look like Mario Balotelli. Really? Okay. I don't know if you mean that as a compliment or otherwise, but for comparisons purposes, it's the first time I'm hearing that. But anyways, if you say so, who am I to say otherwise? You know, but R4XG, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel, as I have this network tested out again, but I do not think I'm going to have much luck with it. Oh, looks like it's back on. Guys, allow me try and switch my network, and I see if we'll be successful. You let me know if things do not go according to plan. I need to switch back on, because this emergency channel does not have sufficient data to keep me going. So we're going to experience a small glitch as I switch back to my other internet source. So please. Okay, it has already switched back on itself. Good, 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 good. Let me know if I'm in the clear, if you guys can still get me well. If you're not, let me before I proceed any further. I wouldn't want to be talking to myself and assuming you guys are hearing everything I'm saying when you're not. Yes, I mean compliment, bro. Thank you. Let me subscribe. Wait, I did. Okay. Okay, good, good, good. Gladiator says we are getting you. Now we can proceed with the conversation. So, Gladiator, I don't know if you agree with me or disagree with me, but based on those reasons, I'd go for Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, because Kylian Mbappe would come with all the branding, huge praise, a lot of press coverage, media coverage. For people that do marketing, know what that means for a club or for a business. He would come with a lot of a lot of shirt sales, club merchandise, and that kind of thing. He already has a following. You get all everything that comes with him. Of course, you also have to dig in deep in your own pockets in terms of buying him, but also putting him on significant wages. But also, as you put him on significant wages, a year or two down the road, you're going to have players that think of equal value or have been of that have been more loyal to the club, also demanding for higher wages. I think we've had that kind of conversation when it comes to Vinicius Junior at Real Madrid, when it came to the wages or his possible pending contract renewal. Apparently, he's demanding wages similar to those of Kylian Mbappe, if not slightly more, and the club and they are not in position to either give it to him or they're just not willing to bow to those kinds of demands. And I remember saying that Florentino Perez is the kind of president that wouldn't be afraid to cut off the arm or a leg to save the body if it would turn to be cancerous, you know. So, and I remember there was an offer from apparently the Saudi Pro League from one of those clubs. I think it was Al Hilal, that was willing to offer about 350 million euros to buy Vinicius Junior, with an option of letting him stay at Real Madrid for one extra season on loan. So when you consider all those dynamics, when it comes to bringing a player like Kylian Mbappe to Arsenal, there are good things, but also there are bad things. I think I don't know who is going to help him, whether it's Real Madrid or he himself, but the media coverage around him, the PR around him needs to improve, and it needs to happen fast. As somebody with a background in digital communications and PR, I know what bad press can cause you. Because as great as he is a talent, if the media is not kind to him, he can soon be a story of yesterday. The advantage for him is he's one, French, two, he's the holy grail or the star boy of the French national team, and therefore he's going to get some good press coverage, at least at home. But elsewhere in Europe, he needs to, I don't know, he either needs to handle it deliberately with his agent or his minders, or Real Madrid need to help him, but he needs some really, really positive media coverage. Because this petition thing, it may sound light, but it could have far-reaching consequences than the ones that we imagine in the immediate interim. Okay. Cavardona, your UFC Madrid, I think R4G is of the view that he would take Cavardona to Arsenal as opposed to him. Gladiator Isekivicha is younger and future still ahead of him. However, Mbappe would immediately bring revenue and fear factor, pedigree, and experience to your team. That's all true. That's all true. And like I said, when it comes to his footballing talent and what he would bring to the club, I do not think that is without a doubt. But also, there's that adage that says, one rotten tomato can spoil an entire basket. So if he comes with that sort of reputation that he's a dressing room antagonizer, when you look at this neat Arsenal family of a squad, you do not want to plug in a player that is going to antagonize that. Remember, Bukayo Saka is Arsenal's poster boy. Why? Because academy graduate, hell end, everything, his English is at home. But beyond that, when you look through the entire Arsenal squad, it's hard for you to pinpoint and say, this is the other star boy of the team, the poster boy of the team. You almost find almost all players are within. Apologies for the internet glitch. Unfortunately, it happened again. Unfortunately, it happened again. I have zero control over that. I'm really, really trying to have my other device on standby to help with that, but it is what it is. So, Gladiator, I completely understand where you're coming from with all that, and I acknowledge it's true. But when you have a player the size of Kylian Mbappe, with his ego, with his brand size, big as it is, being plugged into a dressing room where almost all players are all equal, it may not take long until you have that dressing room in disarray. Now, I would want to believe that Kylian Mbappe is not entirely the problem at Real Madrid. But if he comes in with that sort of reputation, the last thing you want is having divisions within your dressing room. Just because there's this player who thinks he's above everybody else, with their ego, with their demands and things like that. And the last thing you'd want is giving a player special treatment. We know players have signed such contracts where they get preferential treatment. The Neymars having to go and celebrate their birthday, the birthday of their sister, things like that. I've heard of contracts where a player is allowed to go back midst of the season to be allowed to go and see their family, maybe, and that kind of thing. But those are minors. But we know what Kylian Mbappe is, So it's sort of a difficult situation to digest all through. Like I said, there are pros and cons to it. The question would be, what are you more comfortable with? Are you comfortable with making the money in the interim and then perhaps risk losing your dressing room in the long run? Or you rather keep the dressing room intact and take a bet on Kivica Kvaratskhelia? So, but for me, with all factors considered, I'd go with the Kivica Kvaratskhelia. Not in disqualification of Kylian Mbappe's talent, but in acknowledgement of everything else that comes with him. Okay, Robert, I have a question, please. Is there a stadium called Nakivubo in Kampala? Yes. Nakivubo War Memorial Stadium is Uganda's oldest stadium. It's been there since, is it either 1916? I think 1916. Thereabout. It's undergone refurbishment and redevelopment. But yeah, it is there. Nakivubo War Memorial Stadium. Verstappen says hello. Hello, Verstappen. You know? So yeah, this Kylian Mbappe story is going to rage on. But I feel from a PR perspective, he needs to find a way of cleansing his name. He needs to find a way of taking some of the negative stories that are making the brands online taken down. Whoever put out that petition needs to put it down. And he just needs to he needs to do a bit of damage control when it comes to his personal brand. Of course, he could easily go to the World Cup and he smashes it, and then the world forgets that he's had his misgivings. But once you have the media turned into a certain direction, it may be very difficult to bend them back into line. So I do not think he would want to be in that situation. I do not think individually he's ready to go to play in the Saudi Pro League. I think he still wants to be within Europe. And the pool of clubs that would be able to afford him in Europe are not that many. In France, there's only PSG. In the German Bundesliga, it would be a stretch for even Bayern Munich. In the Italian Serie A, at the moment, there's no single club that can afford him. In the Premier League is where you have more clubs that would possibly afford him. Liverpool can afford him, Arsenal can, Manchester City can, Man United can. I'm not sure Chelsea can, given their recent financial conundrums. Nakivubo Memorial Stadium was established in 1926 on land donated by Kabaka of Ghana. Oh, thanks for the correction there on the year. Yeah, 1926. So it's 100 years, 100 years in existence. So out of those 4 Premier League teams, what would be the most ideal destination? Man City, Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool? I do not know. But his talent is without question. Okay, then what else? We've talked about the Ben White news. We've talked about Sergio Ramos. Meanwhile, that game between Atletico de Madrid and Osasuna finished by 2-1. Osasuna pulled one back, while the game between Southampton had a freeze, but it's still it's in the very, very final stages of extra time, and it's still 1-1. So you've not missed that much. You've not missed that much in as far as it is concerned. Oh, come on. Oh, Southampton are leading 2-1 after extra time. Jesus Christ. This internet on and off bits sort of froze my screen. So I was busy reading off the wrong script. Okay. Yeah, I think I've read all the comments. All right. So looks like Southampton are heading to the finals. It's finished 2-1 in favor of Southampton. So they will play Hull City in the finals. Hull City, Southampton. Southampton was in the Premier League last season. I don't know. Would I rather Hull City come back or Southampton? I don't think I have any particular preference, but we'll wait and see. That game will be played on the 23rd of May at Wembley Stadium at about 5 p.m. And then tomorrow there's more action in the Spanish La Liga. Barcelona are playing tomorrow Then we also have a Premier League game that's between Manchester City at home to Crystal Palace. They'll be playing. It's a very, very important game in the context of the Premier League title race. Oliver Glasner said he does not collect paychecks from neither Man City or Arsenal, so he doesn't owe anybody anything in terms of favors, because they were trying to persuade him into the idea that the Premier League title race is in his control. No, it is not. And he said, if Man City win all their games, they can win it. If Arsenal win all their games, it's theirs to take. So it is what it is. Anyways, we'll digest the Manchester City Crystal Palace game in our morning broadcast. That's at 9 a.m. Then elsewhere in the Spanish La Liga, Espanyol will take on Athletic Bilbao. That game will come at 8 p.m. as well as Villarreal against Sevilla. Sevilla are only 3 points above relegation, because the team in 10th place on the Spanish La Liga table is still a candidate of relegation, as is a team second from bottom. I think this is the first time I'm experiencing something like that. Then at 10:30 p.m., you'll have Barcelona play away to Deportivo Alaves. Barcelona's objective is simply to try and chase that 100-point mark, but they've already been crowned champions following their 2-0 victory against Real Madrid over the weekend. Then Mallorca will take on Getafe. Getafe, remember, Jose Bodalas will be leaving at the end of the season. The guy known for epitomizing haram football. Then in the French League One, Brest will take on Strasbourg. That game will come at 8 p.m. while PSG will be playing away to RC Lens at 10 p.m. So that's the game in hand that both sides have. Otherwise, the league will climax at the weekend. That's the French League One. Because remember, for them, they play 34 games. The same applies for the German Bundesliga, because they have 18 teams on their log as opposed to 38 games because of the 20 teams in the Premier League, in the Spanish La Liga, and in the Italian Serie A. So those are the few differences that you can take note of as far as things are concerned there. So anyways, guys, Gladiator, always a pleasure. Verstappen, I hope you've subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much. R4 GXE1, thank you so much for having been part of tonight's podcast. Ash, always a pleasure to see you around. Andre Mothoni, good to see you. You know, LO, it was a pleasure seeing you around, although you came briefly. Zebulu, it was a pleasure to see you around or to have you around. Then Sino Bueno, always a pleasure, although you are heading out to work. Hitel Road, Jack, thank you so much. Adash, always a pleasure to see you around. Rio Dandy, your love and support is not taken for granted. Then, okay, Lashgush, always a pleasure. Walid, thank you so much. Rico, thank you so much. Reluctant Gamer, although you were with us briefly, thank you so much for having been part of tonight's podcast. So, guys, allow me call it a night, and I wish you a blessed night. Let's do this again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We will be coming back live to do the preview for the Manchester City game, to go through all the other news that will be making the rounds from the world of football, and we see where the conversation leads. Like I said, much of it will center around that Manchester City game, given its significance in the Premier League title race, among other things. You never know, we could have new developments when it comes to the managerial pursuits of Chelsea and other clubs. Real Madrid, reports continue to affirm that Jose Mourinho is in pole position to take on the role. I do not know what your views are about okay, before we sign out, guys, let's talk about this and let's have the topic discussed. Okay, Ash says good night. But before, guys, we sign out, Jose Mourinho back to Real Madrid, possibly. If that were to be the case, what are your thoughts on his potential return to the Santiago Bernabeu? We all know his reputation. We know he's a winner. But he's not been at an elite club the size of Real Madrid in the last 8 years, ever since he left Manchester United in 2018, December 2018. He's not been to a club the size of Man United, the club the size of Chelsea, Real Madrid, that kind of thing. He's been to Roma. Roma is a big club, yes, but I would want to think these other ones are, a category above. He's been to Fenerbahce. He's been to Tottenham Hotspur and present day Benfica. So what are your views, your honest opinion about Jose Mourinho possibly making the return to the Santiago Bernabeu? Do you think he's the right pick? And if he's not the right pick, who would you ideally have at the helm of Real Madrid? Who do you think is capable of going in there and fixing that house of Real Madrid? Because no matter how much money Florentino Perez has, it will not it will matter less if he keeps getting these managerial choices wrong. Subi Day says, "Hey, a Messi or Ronaldo?" I'll say neither, or better, even both. Incredible players. I've been privileged. I've been privileged to watch them play. It's been an opportunity. It's been a blessing to watch them play and dominate football for as long as they've done. Everybody, each of them strong within their own rights. So to choose one would be to simplify the debate of the case of preference, because sometimes preference has no reason. You just like the person. So in the objective sense of it, both great players, and we've been blessed to watch them play. So guys, let me know if somebody has a comment about that. Jose Mario Felix Mourinho possibly returning to Real Madrid. Leave me the comments. If there's no comments about that, then we can sign out. I do want to assume that you're typing. If this were WhatsApp, it would show me somebody's typing, but unfortunately it isn't. So I do not know. I don't know if you guys are dropped off. I don't know if you guys are thinking, let's call it tonight. I'll give it a minute as I wait for your comments regarding that. If not, we'll shove the debate or the discussion about Jose Mourinho and preserve it for the morning broadcast at 9 a.m. You know? Waiting on you. Okay. Farouk, aka Gladiator, says, I wouldn't fancy Mourinho to come back, but which manager should come then? Papu says, Papu says, Jesus Mary Martha. Okay, so glad I understand that, but the question is who? Because we have discussed that basket before of elite managers, that the kind that Real Madrid are looking for in terms of proven winners and well respected in the game and have experience. But remember, because it's Real Madrid, if you walk in and you've never won the Champions League, you're not going to be held in the same regard as a Carlo Ancelotti, as a Jose Mourinho. I know he never won it with Real Madrid, but you cannot be held in the same respect with a Pep Guardiola. They'll have an advantage over you. So in that basket, there are those that they cannot get as Real Madrid. They can't get Hans Flick. They can't get Pep Guardiola. I think it's premature, or it would be premature to bring Carlo Ancelotti back. So you already have three options off of the table. So in that bracket where you have managers that have won a league title and a Champions League title, you're then left with Jose Mourinho. You're left with Jurgen Klopp. You're left with Thomas Tuchel. Remind me if there's any other that I've not thought about. Has Champions League, has a league title as well. I'm really trying to think. Because even Thomas Tuchel's league title was with Bayern Munich and PSG. Was it with Bayern? Yes. And PSG. And Champions League with Chelsea. So you can see it's such a small sample space of the kind of managers that fit that description of experienced, respected, proven winner. If Champions League is a factor, and as important as it is to a club like Real Madrid. I feel their hands are tied on this one. Their hands are tied on this one. Jurgen Klopp would have been a good guy, but I feel that Jurgen Klopp would need some bit of time. And Real Madrid and time in the same sentence, in terms of being patient with the manager, are not very synonymous. So you also have to think about it that way, because time is very, very important. Can Real Madrid stomach another season without a trophy whatsoever? Because Jurgen Klopp will come, he'll fix the house. It is going to take him a year or two before he wins something. That's my feeling about him. He'll build you a team, he'll grind that team, but it may take a bit of time for him. So I do not think we have an easy answer to it. I do not think we have an easy answer to it. But in terms of playing, massaging player egos, I do not think you get any manager any better than Jose Mourinho. He's good with those psychological games with players. He's very good at it. He's the guy capable of coming up with words that would put Kylian Mbappe to the ground. Maybe you would ask him, have you ever won the Ballon d'Or? I do not know. Anyways, guys, okay. The question is about the timing of Mourinho coming in. Remember him at Chelsea, round 2, he ended up fighting with players. I know, I understand. Because, okay, round 2, he still won, but still ended up being sacked. Because they part ways with him, I think around December 2015. Thereabout. And then I think is that the time when Solari takes on and then Gusidik comes in? So for the second spell, I think. So even at Real Madrid, and that's partly my worry, that in the interim or in the short term, it may work. But as time goes on, it may crumble away because it's Jose Mourinho. So the timing is not ideal. The timing is not ideal. The problem is Real Madrid are not willing to be patient as well. That's the problem. That's the problem. And the last thing they would want is to see Barcelona win the Champions League again before they do. Because that's the only thing, apart from the historical context of them having more league titles than Barcelona, what they've always been getting a number over Barcelona is to come out of a season where they've won the Champions League. And then they make look the Spanish La Liga title very simplistic when they are drawing comparisons in terms of their rivalry, So, and remember, that's going to be Hansi Flick's objective. They want to build a team that is capable of winning the Champions League, Yeah, he's still there for a year and possibly even another year. So, depending on how it goes. And the beauty about his Barcelona team is that many of those players are still young. So, some are simply just getting better and better. And if you plug in the right pieces, they're going to continue to compete favorably. Remember, they'll win all these other games. And I mean, they've been that young and beating you in the El Clasico. How about, how about when they, improve and become better and become more experienced with age? Mourinho would come with a chaotic game, of course, for the El Clasico, but it will be classic Jose Mourinho. It will be classic Jose Mourinho. Anyways, guys, thank you so much. Let's wrap this one up. We'll continue the conversation tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's been a pleasure doing this with you. Allow me to wish you a blessed night. Let me get to some other duties as I also engage with other forums before I call it tonight. It's been a pleasure. It's 8 minutes past 1 a.m. So have a blessed night. Until tomorrow. Bye bye for now.